We often hear about the glory of ancient Rome, the magnificent Colosseum, the intricate network of roads that spanned an empire, the legal system that still influences us today. We think of powerful legions, brilliant emperors, and a civilization at the pinnacle of human achievement. It's a story of triumph, innovation, and order. But what if I told you that beneath this gleaming surface of greatness, another force was at play, a much darker, more primal force? Fear. Yes, fear. It was the invisible engine that powered much of what we admire about Rome. It was in the air people breathed, in the laws they followed, and in the very foundations of their society. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the celebrated Roman Empire and explore the hidden world of terror that kept it all together. This isn't the Rome you learned about in school. This is the story of how fear built an empire. Let's start with the most obvious source of fear, the Roman military. Cities that resisted were often razed to the ground, their populations enslaved or worse. Take the destruction of Carthage, for example. But for every benevolent emperor, there was a Caligula, or a Nero, whose reigns were defined by paranoia, cruelty, and absolute terror. The opulent palaces of Rome were often just gilded cages, filled with whispers, plots, and the ever-present fear of a dagger in the dark. You might think, well, if I just keep my head down and don't get involved in politics, I'll be fine. Public crucifixions were a common sight along major roads, not just as a punishment for criminals, but as a public spectacle of state power. It was a gruesome and very visible message to everyone passing by. This is what happens when you step out of line. Spartacus led a famous slave revolt, and for a brief time, it seemed like they might win their freedom. But the rebellion was crushed with overwhelming force. The Romans crucified 6,000 of the captured slaves along the Appian Way, the main road leading to Rome. Imagine growing up in a household where your father legally held the power of life and death over you. This structure instilled a deep-seated fear and an absolute obedience that mirrored the power structure of the state itself. We see them as entertainment, the ancient equivalent of a football game, but they were also a key part of the architecture of fear. The games were a demonstration of Roman power over life and death. They desensitized the population to violence and reinforced the idea that the state could kill with impunity. It was a way of channeling the aggression and anxieties of the masses into a controlled, spectacular event. By providing free grain and bloody entertainment, the emperors kept the potentially restless population of Rome distracted and docile. But beneath the cheers of the crowd was a chilling message. The same power that could put on this incredible show of death could easily turn that power against its own people. So, when we look back at the Roman Empire, it's important to see the whole picture. Yes, they built incredible aqueducts and wrote profound philosophy, but the foundations of that magnificent civilization were cemented with the fear of the conquered, the paranoia of the elite, the terror of the enslaved, and the anxiety of the common citizen. Rome's greatness and its brutality were two sides of the same coin. The order it created was an order maintained by the constant, chilling threat of violence and death. Understanding this dark side doesn't diminish Rome's achievements, but it gives us a more complete and perhaps more honest understanding of one of history's greatest and most terrifying empires. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the dark heart of Rome interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what other historical topics you'd like to see uncovered. See you next time. They weren't considered people at all. They were property, like a chair or a cart. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this brutal reality. A reality that powered an empire. If you were a wealthy Roman, your status wasn't just measured in land or gold, but in the number of human beings you owned. A status symbol. A living, breathing testament to your power. Think about that. And even children hacked away at rock to extract gold, silver, and lead. They were the muscle behind Rome's architectural genius, quarrying the stone, hauling the materials, and raising the walls, often in dangerous conditions. They worked in workshops, crafting pottery, textiles, and metal goods. They even served in roles we might find surprising. The Roman state itself owned slaves, using them as clerks and maintenance workers in government buildings. Educated slaves, often from Greece, were highly valued and could hold positions of significant responsibility, managing businesses or libraries for their masters. But even these privileged few were still property, their fates hanging on the whim of their owner. So where did all these people come from? The biggest source was warfare. As Rome's legions conquered new territories, from Britain to the Middle East, they brought back captives by the tens of thousands. Entire populations could be enslaved after a city was captured. The Gallic Wars, led by Julius Caesar for instance, are said to have resulted in 1 million people being sold into slavery. Another major source was piracy and banditry. Pirates prowled the Mediterranean, capturing travelers and selling them at bustling slave markets. There were also children born into slavery. If your mother was a slave, you were a slave, regardless of who your father was. Under Roman law, slaves had no rights. They couldn't legally marry, own property, or testify in court against a free person. They could beat, brand, torture, or kill them with little to no legal consequence. Their children, as we've mentioned, would also belong to the master, adding to his stock of slaves. This was a particularly cruel aspect of the institution, destroying families and perpetuating the cycle of bondage. Now, you might be thinking, did anyone ever fight back? Absolutely. Resistance took many forms. On a daily basis, it might be small acts of defiance, working slowly, pretending to be sick, or breaking tools. Some tried to run away, a risky gamble. If caught, a runaway slave would be branded on the forehead with the letters fuga. And then there were the large-scale rebellions. The most famous, of course, was the one led by Spartacus. Between 73 and 71 BC, this Thracian gladiator escaped his training school and gathered an army of escaped slaves that swelled to over 70,000 people. For 2 years, they terrorized southern Italy, defeating several Roman armies sent against them. Spartacus's rebellion showed the deep-seated fear the Roman elite had of the enslaved population they depended on. The eventual crushing of the revolt was merciless. Thousands were killed in the final battle, and 6,000 survivors were crucified along the Appian Way, the main road leading to Rome, as a horrific warning to anyone else who dared to dream of freedom. Could a slave ever be free? Yes, it was possible, through a process called manumission. A master could choose to free a slave, sometimes as a reward for long and loyal service. Sometimes a slave could save up a small allowance, their peculium, and buy their own freedom or the freedom of a loved one. This was a powerful incentive for slaves to work hard and be obedient. Upon being freed, they became a freedman or freedwoman, a libertus or liberta. They gained Roman citizenship, but it was a limited form. They couldn't hold high public office, for example, and they still owed certain duties to their former master, who now became their patron. But their children would be born as full Roman citizens, with no restrictions. This possibility of freedom, however slim, was a crucial part of what made the Roman system of slavery so stable for so long. It offered a glimmer of hope, channeling potential rebellion into cooperation. But we should never forget that for the vast majority, freedom was a dream they would never realize. They were born, lived, and died as someone else's property. Historians estimate that at the peak of the empire, perhaps as much as 1/3 of the population of Italy were slaves. When we look at the grandeur of Rome, it's essential to remember the price that was paid. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this exploration of ancient Rome interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what other hidden aspects of the past you'd like to uncover. See you next time. Have you ever wondered why someone would risk their life for a chance at freedom? When we think of slavery, we often picture back-breaking labor in the fields. But for countless women, it was so much more than that. It was a daily battle against unimaginable cruelty, a constant state of fear and humiliation that went far beyond physical exhaustion. This is the story of their fight for survival, a story of incredible courage against all odds. Imagine waking up every single day not knowing what new horror it might bring. For enslaved women, this was reality. The threat of violence was a constant shadow. A small mistake, a perceived slight, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time could result in a brutal beating. These weren't just punishments. They were the calculated acts of terror designed to break their spirits, to enforce absolute control and strip away every ounce of their humanity. But the physical pain was only one part of the torment. The psychological abuse was relentless. Enslaved women were treated as property, not people. Their bodies were not their own. They were subjected to horrific abuse, a constant violation that left deep, invisible scars. The trauma of this experience is something we can barely comprehend today. It was a weapon used to assert dominance and instill a sense of powerlessness. Yet, even in the face of such degradation, the human spirit's desire for dignity and self-worth refused to be extinguished. This fight to reclaim their own bodies was a powerful motivator for escape. Perhaps the most heart-wrenching aspect of this experience was the constant threat of family separation. A mother's love for her child is one of the most powerful forces in the world. Now, imagine living with the daily fear that your child could be sold away from you at any moment, never to be seen again. This wasn't a rare occurrence. It was a common practice. Children were torn from their mother's arms, husbands from their wives, families shattered for profit. The anguish of this separation was a pain that cut deeper than any whip. For many women, the decision to run wasn't just about saving themselves. It was a desperate, love-fueled attempt to keep their families together or to find a child that had been stolen from them. So, when we talk about escape, it's crucial to understand it wasn't about seeking adventure or a new life in the abstract. It was a desperate act of survival. It was a mother running to protect her child. It was a woman running to reclaim her own body and soul. It was a human being running from a system that tried to crush her spirit at every turn. The risks were immense. Capture often meant severe punishment or even death. The journey itself was perilous, filled with unknown dangers, hunger, and the constant fear of being caught. Yet, they ran. They hid in swamps, navigated by the stars, and relied on the kindness of strangers in the Underground Railroad. They faced down their deepest fears for a chance, however slim, to live a life free from constant terror. Each step they took was an act of defiance. It was a declaration that they were more than property, that their lives mattered, and that their love for their children was a force that could not be broken. Their courage was not born from a desire for something better, but from the necessity of escaping something truly unbearable. These stories of escape are not just historical footnotes. They are profound testaments to the resilience of the human spirit. They force us to confront the true, multifaceted horror of slavery, moving beyond the simplistic image of labor to understand the deep, personal trauma inflicted upon millions. The women who risked everything were not just running from chains. They were running towards their own humanity. They were fighting for the right to live without fear, to love their families without the threat of separation, and to simply be seen as human. Their legacy is one of extraordinary bravery. It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, the desire for freedom, dignity, and family is a light that can never be fully extinguished. These were not just victims. They were heroes who fought back in the most powerful way they could, by choosing to risk death for a chance to truly live. Their stories deserve to be told, to be remembered, and to be honored. They show us the incredible strength it takes to break free from a world designed to keep you broken. Thank you for watching and taking the time to understand this crucial part of our history. If you found this story powerful, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that delves into the untold stories of the past. Your support helps us continue to bring these important narratives to light.